Do whatever you want, Mark, because you are live on the Art of Service weekly stream, our interview series with interesting people. And today you're the interesting person. So it goes directly onto LinkedIn, it goes directly onto YouTube, it goes directly onto Facebook. So you can either share it on your LinkedIn and it goes straight there, or after we finish our chat, you can share it. I'm also downloading, so you can then download the original recording if you want to. So up to
Sounds
you.
great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Yeah, I don't see a share button on my side, so I can't do that live, but I'll share it after the fact.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Mark, welcome. I went through my emails and we met in late 2009, early 2010. The very first email I could find here is us talking about the EO Family Conference, which happened
Yeah.
in July 2009. And we were talking about trying to get that up and running in Hawaii in 2010. So, that's 12 years ago.
Yeah, that's
Crazy.
amazing.
So
Amazing.
in that period, a lot has changed for you. So can you just introduce yourself? What were you doing? Because I know you were doing some really exciting stuff in 2010. You've been selling businesses. So what's been your journey? How did you become to be Mark Friedler?
Well, I think number one, well, in 2010, I just sold my company that was a big video game content company called Game Daily. I had just been getting out of a relationship with the purchaser, a large media company here in the States called Time Warner. They bought a big brand in the States called AOL. So my company, Game Daily, became the gaming brand for AOL Time Warner, and it was a really interesting experience. I learned a lot. You know, being an entrepreneur, your dream is always to sell and to sell to a big
Mm.
company. And that's kind of like the holy grail for a lot of entrepreneurs. Yet at the same time, it's kind of like you're putting your kid up for adoption. And, you know, your kid could be adopted by, an amazing family with a white picket fence and wonderful people, or it could be adopted by the Taliban. And
Mm.
you don't really know. I mean, you have an idea when you're going into it, but I don't know anyone who said, "Oh yeah, I sold my business and this company said they were just going to screw it up and make life miserable for my employees." No one's ever said that, right? It's like, "Oh, the synergy and it's going to be great and 1 + 1 is 10 and yada yada yada." And very rarely does that happen. So I think,
Mm.
and for me at the time, you recall when we met at the family conference, I had my kids with me, who at the time I think were uh, like 9 and 5 or something like that. And at that time, I had been with my company longer than I'd been with my kids.
Mm.
So I think another thing that entrepreneurs kind of don't really understand is, depending what sort of person you are, but I felt a very strong emotional connection to my business. My business identified me in many ways. I was the person that started Game Daily. I was the CEO, and then literally one day to the next, you're owned by someone else, and you're just on an org chart reporting to somebody. And in my case, I was reporting to someone I wouldn't have even hired. You
Mm.
know, so that's always difficult. And so coming into that with a humility and why eyes wide open and can you learn and that sort of thing is really interesting. So I had just left AOL Time Warner. I was asking about what I wanted to do at the time. The way healthcare was working in the United States was changing under President Obama. So things have gotten a lot more complicated because in the United States, employers have to pay for healthcare. So long story short, having a part-time employee meant, you'd have to give them benefits. And when you got about 50 people, it got more complicated. And I was just
Mm.
like, I just don't want the drama. I have 2 kids. I don't want 60 kids again, right? 2 is great. I just want to do a virtual business. I want to do something that's really cool, work with really interesting people who I like, who I respect, who I enjoy spending time with. And, and I don't want to work with any assholes. So how am I going to do that? So a partner and I started a consulting business where we put our individual strengths to work. He was a really good technology person, programmer, kind of visionary. I'm a really good business development, partnership, marketing, grow a business from that side of the plate. So together we went and we served as service providers to a lot of growing video game content media businesses. And in fact, we ended up building a bunch of virtual worlds for big media brands. And we built one for the song show American Idol. And it was super cool. And then as the downturn was still going on, a lot of these companies were like, nah, we don't, it's kind of out of our area of expertise. We don't want to do that. We canceled it. So what was really hot, which was virtual worlds, basically evaporated 2009, 2010. The irony now, when everyone's talking about the metaverse, is it's exactly the same stuff.
It's all full circle.
All full circle. Maybe the tools are a little better, this sort of thing, but it's kind of full circle. So I did that for a few years. And then in our consulting, one of our clients' companies got purchased by Oracle. So our client there asked me to come over and run several vertical markets at Oracle. And I did that for 2 years. I wanted to prove to myself that as an entrepreneur, I was employable. Could I work for someone else? Could I have a job?
And you always stayed in sort of like that technical field, but as a non-technical person, right?
Correct.
So it's like, So Oracle and then Oracle Cloud specifically from memory?
Yeah. So there were two different areas inside of Oracle. There was something called Marketing Cloud that did like services like Responsus and Eloqua, these kind of B2B marketing services. And then the other side of the business was Data Cloud, which aggregated all these different data profiles and basically made a trading desk where you could say, oh, I want an audience that looks like that. I want to market to them. There was the whole controversy around that whole Facebook marketing thing, selling. So that whole world, I actually didn't really like because it felt really inauthentic. And it felt like, you're trading people, in a terrible way. I mean, not to make a terrible reference, but it kind of felt like, back in slavery where you put someone on the auction block and you auction them. Except now we're all digital people living in a digital world. And unfortunately, so many times a day, your digital identity is sold and bought and sold right here by, actors like Facebook and Google. And
so even though you proved to yourself that you are employable, it was such a clash with your core values. You needed to get out of there.
Yes, and not only that, but what I realized two things. At a company like Oracle, there are a lot of people. I think in big companies in general, people understand like how to work. How to work in a big company, and how to be successful in a big company. And a lot of times that means like keeping your head down, not doing anything to rock the boat, basically just being a leech. I mean, let's be honest. And so what I found frustrating in my role was that there was a disconnect between my input and the output. And the thing I find so rewarding as being an entrepreneur is you can decide, how hard you want to get on the throttle. And most of the time, the more effort you put in, you start seeing results in relatively short order. In really big companies, you're this little tiny part of a
Mm,
really big thing, and you have a plan and you think it's a great plan, and then someone who you report to doesn't think it's a great plan, or that person gets moved or leaves or quits. And so a lot of people, I think, believe that, oh, if I just go to a big company, there'll be stability and it'll be safe and blah 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 and all that sort of thing. And I don't think that's true. In fact, when you work at a big company, you are a line on a spreadsheet, literally.
mm.
And
But
I've
isn't that the irony of life in itself? Is that where people feel they have comfort and security and safety, it's actually right on the other end. It's out of your comfort zone. It is when you're stepping out to do your own thing that gives you a lot more control than the perceived control as being an employee in a large company. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that you're a bottle bobbing in the sea, and if the wind blows one way or it blows another way or a wave comes one way, that's the way you're going to go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if you're okay with that, that's fine. The difference is if you want to have a control of your destiny, yeah, you can be in a big company. I hope I get promoted, and I hope I work my way
Mm,
up. And you can gather a lot of skills. You can have a lot of experiences. But I think setting your course that, hey, I'm starting here and I'm going to go there may or may not work.
yeah.
Versus an entrepreneur, as
So,
an entrepreneur.
so what did you learn in that period? So you've sold the business, you went to work for Oracle, which is a large corporate. What did you learn that you then took back into your entrepreneurial life in setting up your next business? What is it that you could not have done without that experience?
I think I learned patience, which is something that I was always kind of lacking in. Um, I learned uh, how to be more diplomatic.
Hmm.
And I think it's easy. And I know a lot of people's entrepreneurs are like, blah, 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 and they shoot off their mouth and they, off the top of their head, say what they want. And,
Yeah.
you just can't do that in a big company. And even more so now in the environment we live in, you have to be incredibly careful about what you say. If someone's
Yeah.
offended or you say something, this or that, you could be, it could be the end of your career.
Hmm.
So I learned that. And I also learned, the power of process. And I think what big companies are really good at is kind of building a machine.
Hmm.
And once that machine is built and they have scale, it just runs.
Hmm.
Like Oracle, Microsoft, Google, they don't make the best products necessarily for any specific vertical or any specific area, but the customer buys so much from these companies that they're like, you know what, they're not going to go out of business. There was that saying many years ago, a technology person never got fired for buying from IBM.
Yeah.
It's the same thing from Oracle or Microsoft or one of these companies.
Yeah.
And so these companies are very good at figuring something out. And then once they've built it and they've built it at scale, it's kind of like the Jim Collins book, with the metaphor of the flywheel, right? Once you get that flywheel turning, you have momentum. And so the power of momentum, I think, is something else I learned. And then another thing I learned is that just because you build it doesn't mean that you can sell it.
Hmm.
And so I've seen this a lot. I've been an advisor to a lot of startups, especially in Silicon Valley. You see a lot of technical founders, and they're like, well, I just wrote this great code. It was at a hackathon. It was 3 days and solves this huge problem. Let's go to market. And it may have taken them 4 days to write the initial product, but it could take them a year. It could take them 2 years to gain the trust
Hmm.
of a real customer who's willing to pay them. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs who I've met, myself included, are impatient. It's like, look, I solved the problem. It's the greatest thing. Well, like, don't you guys see it? You know. So, and then the final point I think would be kind of humility, right? As as an entrepreneur, a lot of us do something, but we're lucky in terms of timing. We do something at the right time. A product comes to market, and it's a good product, but the timing for it is great. You know, I myself have come out with several products that are great products, but the timing was wrong, too early. And so I think having humility for where, you know, your life cycle is for what you're doing. And the other thing I really tried to do there was learn from other people. There were a lot of people who were there for many years who may not have been my style of, you know, operator. They weren't go out and take risks. They weren't entrepreneurs, but they were very good at what they did in a defined area. So I think that also gets back to, you know, process and team and teamwork. In a bigger company, you can argue it's less important to have a great team because there's so many people. But even in big companies, you know, it's usually a few people that are a core team that go and get something done.
Yeah.
And if someone's not doing it right, or someone's difficult, or, you know, you're in conflict with them all the time, it just makes that, you know, a lot harder. So I think my big takeaway is, now when I think about things, is like, hey, can I do something that I really care about? And I personally believe that being passionate for what you do is very important. And a lot of people say, well, you know, if you're passionate about what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And I don't think that's really the case. But, you know, it must really suck to do something every day that you really hate doing.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that hate doing it, which is unfortunate. There are a lot of people who may not be like, this is my life's work and I'm saving the world, but they're really good at what they do, and they really get enjoyment and fulfillment out of what they do, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
And I personally, you know, after I left Oracle, I got into the blockchain world in like 2016.
So how did that happen? Because that doesn't seem like a completely logical step, being a you know, self-proclaimed non-technical person.
Yeah. So because of all my years in the video gaming business, a lot of my early video gaming friends had discovered this crazy thing called Bitcoin. And they were like, wow, let's look at this, let's look at that. So a lot of these people I knew were building businesses based on Bitcoin. And then they were looking at other ways to use blockchain technology. Then Ethereum came out, you know, which was a kind of programmable blockchain protocol. And so a lot of these people were like, hey, this is really cool. We can do this and that. We can rethink this or that. And to me, it felt like early in my career, the late 1990s, when the internet felt brand new, and wow, you can send a message and it goes from the United States to Australia instantly, and it doesn't cost anything. It's like, what? You know, like, that was a crazy idea at the moment, but like messaging, instant messaging, email just became the killer apps of the internet.
So explain to me, being, you know, the 50-something-year-old layman person, this the whole blockchain thing. How does that work for businesses? How can startups, accelerators, entrepreneurs, how can we utilize blockchain technology to either create business, serve our clients better, do better marketing? How does that work? Because there's so much noise in the market at the moment about blockchain, NFTs, and then it's all intermingled with crypto. And, you know, depending on who you talk to, it's either the best thing since sliced bread or Satan reincarnated. Like, it's anything in between.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Ivanka. And the problem is that there are a lot of people that have made a lot of money from a variety of different either investing in digital assets and tokens and Bitcoin and Dogecoin and Ethereum, and there are thousands of different digital currencies out there that you could invest in. So a lot of people do that honestly because they want to make money. Most of these things don't have any utility. They don't really help the world be a better place. A lot of companies issue tokens to incentivize their people to do things, which sometimes is a good idea, sometimes not. So I think so Bitcoin is a product built on its own blockchain. And the only utility for Bitcoin right now is really a store of value. It's not really practical. You're not going to go buy a coffee with Bitcoin. I mean, you could using something called Lightning Network, but the whole point of Bitcoin is that it's decentralized, meaning the Australian Central Bank, the US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, no one controls it. It's just a pure market control. And there are a lot of actors in the market, and the price, as you've seen, is very volatile. Earlier in 2022, it was $68,000 of Bitcoin, and where we are right now today, it's about 19,000.
Yeah, I think it just dipped under 20.
Yeah, but at the same time, the first time I bought Bitcoin, I felt like an idiot because I had spent $800 of Bitcoin, and it went down to $200. I'm like, I'm an idiot, and it's one of those things. So Bitcoin, I think, is a store of value. Ethereum.
So is that pure as speculative? Like I can't get to Reno or Vegas, so I'll buy Bitcoin. Is that purely a speculative, trying to create money out of?
Well, I think there's a sincere belief that trusting a government to be honest and be forthright about what is money can be problematic. I mean, you look at the United States right now, we have tremendous inflation caused by tremendous overspending by the president and the federal government, and there's no consequences for that. Whereas if you bring in $10,000 and you're spending $15,000 every month, well, that's not going to last very long. At some point, you're going to run out of your savings, or you can't keep that up. Governments can keep that up. So I think a lot of people are concerned, and in a lot of countries, governments nationalize businesses. They devalue currencies. They do all sorts of things. So you think that you've worked a long time, you think you have money saved, you think you have value stored, and then all of a sudden the government pulls the rug out from under you and changes the rules. So the promise of Bitcoin is that, hey, here's something that is purely controlled by people, not by governments. The market tells you what the value is, and the belief is, since the supply of Bitcoin is limited to only 21 million, they can never make any more of it, that due to the scarcity factor, and as more and more people want an alternative to a government-run currency, the value of Bitcoin should just continue to rise over the long haul. And if you look at the longer-term graph, yes, it's done that dramatically. If you bought Bitcoin in 2010 for a few pennies, and that would have been the best performing investment ever. Whereas if you bought it in January of 2022 at $68,000 and you're down 70%, that wouldn't be a great investment.
No.
But it's like, do you believe long term that governments are the best entities to make decisions about things, or individuals? It's really philosophical.
So that's purely the crypto side of things. So as a business, I'm still struggling to see the value in that.
Right. So all blockchain technology is is basically a decentralized system where a bunch of machines agree that something has happened, and then they write that record to a block.
Yeah.
And the difference between that and a normal database is if you started a database and you're running the database, only you have access to it. No one else can see what's in it. Or if you're a company and you're running your books, there were a couple of big fraudulent businesses in the United States. One Enron like 20 years ago where they stole all the money. There was no visibility. It was dual entry bookkeeping, and everyone runs on dual entry bookkeeping. Think about blockchain as triple entry bookkeeping. So there's a third ledger where you can publicly see all the transactions that have happened. So if someone's like, oh, we're selling lots and lots of widgets, you can go to the blockchain record and see, in fact, if they are transacting a lot. If they're not, then, that's fake. So a couple of use cases, I ran enterprise blockchain for Anheuser-Busch InBev for a couple years. And there were looking at using blockchain technology to onboard suppliers. And the idea there was you're a supplier and you have a whole bunch of sensitive information, and you don't want that publicly available. So it gets put on a blockchain, it gets encrypted, but all the data is there such that if your company is a competitor, so we're Anheuser-Busch, they're Coca-Cola. We both want to buy aluminum cans. Anheuser-Busch has spent 8 months onboarding a supplier. All that supplier's information is now in a system that is encrypted and no one else can see. So Coca-Cola comes along, it's like, we want to buy aluminum cans. And now 90% of that work is already done because it's set up such that it's not in your database, it's not in my database, it's in a database that's not owned by anyone, that anyone can access with the right permissions.
Yeah.
And so now I can see, okay, all these things I need, you already have entered once, and now I can do business with you, and it will take me 2 weeks to onboard you instead of 8 months it took the first time.
So and it's probably a crude comparison, but is it comparable to, when you talk to IP, there's like open source or Creative Commons, but then with a clear, is there a clear understanding of the original owner of that information? Because if you step from blockchain to NFTs, that seems to be revolving a lot around who's the original owner of that particular asset.
Right. That's a really important question. Yeah. So the great thing about the blockchain is if you own something, if you own an asset, you own an NFT, you can prove that you own it. You can prove the provenance of it. And now that record of it is locked, time-stamped, and encrypted such that if anyone's like, well, Ivanka doesn't really own that, you can go back and be like, well, let's go back and here's the public record that I do own that. And if you then want to sell it to me, I'm like, well, how do I know that's not a fake Bored Ape? You're like, no, this is Bored Ape number 200 and I have the record and here it's on the blockchain and I can prove it. Okay, so that's what's called, a permissionless or a trustless transaction, where before, if I'm going to go buy an expensive work of art, I'd have to go to a Sotheby's or a Christie's because I trust their reputation to make sure I won't get ripped off or something's not accurate. Whereas here, you can trust the data that is on the blockchain and that is, validated by other actors all around that, in fact, it is you who's the identity and it is an asset that you own.
Yeah. So where crypto is really decentralizing the whole monetary system, the NFT part of the blockchain is decentralizing the trust of ownership, trust of truth, the true story.
Yeah, and I think NFTs are more than that because all NFTs really are a smart contract. And a smart contract is like in the old times of spreadsheets of if then statements, right? or macros, those of you who use Excel a lot. And so you can program that, hey, if you buy an NFT and it's one of 1,000, every time the artist comes out with music, you will get that music for free, as an example. Or every time that artist goes and does a show, you will get early access to buy tickets of that show. Or so there are a bunch of benefits that you'll get by being engaged. And the difference between, let's say, social media and the big revolution with Facebook was they came up with, okay, let's use your real ID. I'm not just, Australian person 12345. I'm, Ivanka Menken to be on Facebook. Whereas now in an NFT world, you're attaching a wallet, and your wallet is kind of your source of truth about what transactions you do and don't do. So you can hold, and so there on the blockchain, the holy grail is what's called self-sovereign identity. So instead of relinquishing your information, your identity to Google, to Facebook, to Twitter, to a credit bureau, you should be able to hold that identity yourself, custody that yourself, allow people access to that, and you can set your own toll. Like, hey, if you want to use my data and sell it to an advertiser, it will cost you $1. And you can have a smart contract that's allowing that to happen. Yeah. And so if anyone wants that, they can come interact with you. But I think NFTs.
Well, that's a really. I'm just thinking like you talk about social media and advertising, and there's a lot of discussion about third party, first party, and zero party data, and especially when you talk about privacy rules and GDPR and all that sort of stuff. So if you can turn then that blockchain opportunity to say, okay, if you give us zero party data, then we put that in a blockchain, and then you get a percentage of advertising revenue or something like that. So that would be the next step of like retargeting, because then it's in the best interest of the person who's retargeted to get their information out.
Yeah, exactly. And as we talked about earlier, you being self-sovereign, I mean, that's kind of the whole concept of freedom for human beings, is that, you're in charge of yourself. Someone else doesn't own you. That model didn't work too well in the past.
Well, it worked for some people, but not for most.
Yeah. And, but if you're in control of your identity, and today, before you'd buy someone, you'd buy their body so they could go do work, somewhere. Now, this is you. Everything that's here, your interests, your spending, your trends, who you're dating, who you're buying stuff from. It's all digital now. So I think we really need a movement towards digital liberation. And I think the last 20 years of social media, when we look at that, will not be seen in a very good light. And especially, you look at what's happening to kids and how they're, how it came out last year that Facebook and Instagram knew that Instagram was incredibly dangerous and harmful to teenagers, and especially to young girls. But they just crank that up to get more views, to sell more stuff, to sell more data. And that's kind of the ugly side of, kind of big business and then big tech specifically. But if you're able to, have control of your digital identity and then create opportunities to transact with that, with unknown people in a marketplace, and do that automatically and get paid for that, that's kind of an interesting idea. So, there's been a lot going on in the last few months about what's called play to earn gaming. There's the most popular game up until this point in play to earn has been one called Axie Infinity. And it's a blockchain based game. And a whole bunch of people were playing that game in the Philippines and Vietnam, and they were getting paid for their work and creating assets and selling tokens. So a lot of these people actually had that as their full-time job, because they were delivering value to the community of the games, but they were getting paid. And up until this point, if you're playing a game, you might be having fun, but all the value is being accrued by the publisher, not by the players. So that concept about empowering the individual to make money, to have control of their data, what they do with it, how they transact with it, that's a powerful idea. And a lot of the executions today are not where things will be 5 years from now.
Yeah.
But there's starts in the right direction. So I mean, there's another blockchain-based storage business called Filecoin, and basically there are people who run Filecoin servers that take your information that you want to store, and they store it for free, and the people who agree to store it get paid in tokens as an incentive to run this network. So instead of running a network securing Bitcoin, they're running a network securing file storage. So that same idea can work in a lot of different use cases.
Yeah. And you started to talk about NFT when I very rudely cut you off because I had an idea. And I know you just came back from New York City NFT, the conference. So that was last week. So from that conference and knowing what you know now about blockchain usage and cryptocurrencies and NFTs and what is the biggest groundswell, I suppose, that is happening at this point in time that creates business opportunities that you saw at that conference last week?
Well, I think we talked about ownership and controlling your your digital destiny. I think another term I like to use is digital serfdom, like SERF. Like in the Middle Ages, you had all the serfs that ran around and fed the king. And what I think is exciting about NFTs is people gravitate towards communities that they like the art, or they like what the musician or artist stands for, and they want to be involved in it. So a lot of what's going on with these NFT communities are very robust conversations, interactions, on platforms like Discord, where people kind of self coalesce. And it's like, hey, I don't know this Ivanka person, and she's from Australia, and I've never met her, but hey, we have a lot of interests in common, and wow, and there's some other people that have similar interests. So it's kind of like enabling people to have a seed of mutual interest, and that seed of mutual interest might be a character or a piece of art or a video game or a musician. But I think the key thing there, is that you are involved and you feel like you're part of something. And I think that the flip side of the social media world and the digital world is, although we're more connected than we've ever been, we're also more isolated than we've ever been. And then on top of that, we've had 2 years of COVID where we, haven't been able to feel and see and be with other human beings. Like, that's been very destructive to a lot of people. But so to get back to your question about, kind of what's the killer app for NFTs, I think it's enabling people to do stuff that they're interested in an easy way. So, for example, I was at this NFT conference, and I saw a really interesting artwork where there are all these different iterations of Marilyn Monroe, like in different, drawings and different colors and glasses, and one, for whatever reason, I thought was really cool. I liked the coloring. I liked the way it was. So I just bought it, and it was like a few $100s.
Hmm.
And, the artist is interesting. And so as things happen with this artist who's pretty well known, like more and more things will show up in my wallet. Um,
Hmm.
I think it's still hard for normal people to get on MetaMask and buy Ethereum and go buy an NFT. That there's a lot of the usability, the customer experience needs to be a lot easier.
Yeah, it's
There's
not quite
one,
eBay yet, is it?
well, there's one company I believe doing a really good job with this, and it's a company called Dapper Labs, and they're the company that put out CryptoKitties, maybe four years ago. And what they've done is they've hidden all the geeky stuff, hidden all the language like wallets and exchanges, and you have an app, and they have a service called NBA Top Shots, where you can collect different digital art pieces of different players and hold it in your app. And they're not calling it a wallet. If you want to buy it from me, I can sell it to you. They've just made it a lot more accessible.
Hmm.
So I think that has to happen on a much broader scale to make NFTs, more accessible. The other thing too is that, if you get involved with an NFT and they have an interesting community, more and more things will kind of show up in the community. Like you'll get access to things that you're interested in, or experiences. And I think that's the real thing. When you think about entertainment, people have been starved for experiences. They haven't gone
Hmm.
anywhere in a couple of years, and now all of a sudden, because you bought, take for example the Bored Ape Yacht Club, you bought some ape which are worth a few $100,000.
Hmm.
You get invited to the ape yacht party at Art Basel
Hmm.
in Miami, and then the apes put out their own token, and they airdrop, or they give, everyone owns an ape 50,000 of these tokens. Well, now all of a sudden these tokens are worth a few dollars each, and now you've gotten a couple $100,000 just by being part of this community.
Hmm.
Obviously the Bored Apes are, I think right now, at least the top project of all the NFTs out there. And honestly, a lot of these NFTs will not survive because the people who start them, don't keep on working them after a certain point if they don't think they're going to get rich. So, I mean, there's a lot of money grabbing in NFTs right now, honestly, for sure. But I think the idea is cool that, let's say if you were to go to a concert, and then you walk out of the concert, and it's like, okay, great, now you have a paper ticket, in your pocket, but what else do you have after spending a few $100s to go to a
Hmm.
concert? Nothing. Whereas if you go to, if you bought an NFT, you have an ongoing relationship with the artist, and you'll
Hmm.
have access to merchandise, to concerts, to music, to experiences. Like look at oddly enough, I think one of the coolest bands out there is a bunch of 70-year-old guys with makeup. Kiss, right? I think they were just in Australia, or they're going soon. They're coming to Australia, and if you haven't seen them, my wife and I saw them last year. They're amazing for a bunch of old guys. They put on a great show, but they do this thing called the Kiss Cruise. They have
Hmm.
a cruise where fans get on board and pay a few $1,000s, and go on a 4-day cruise with them and hear music and meet other like-minded people and exchange experiences. So I think that sort of, that idea has been around, right? And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I want to get more engaged with them, and I want to meet more people who are like-minded, who like the music I like. I'm wearing a Metallica shirt because I went to their 40th anniversary concert in San Francisco last December, and it was super cool because all the people who were
Hmm.
there were really excited about being there because they had been fans of Metallica for a long time. So I just think that NFTs are just an enabling technology to make happen what's already happened, but to make it happen more easily and give you access to more stuff,
Yeah.
if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, because ultimately, human beings, we crave connection, we crave feeling part of a community and being a valuable asset to that community. So
Exactly.
it's utilizing technology, blockchain, NFTs to create that for you and your own community.
Yeah, and then I mean, look right behind you. I'm looking at a shelf that has a collection, I think, of books back there,
Mm,
right? And so, as humans, we collect stuff, right?
mm.
That's just kind of been what
Yes.
we do, for better or for
Yeah, you,
worse, right?
you say collect, some say hoard.
Exactly. Yeah.
Potato, potato.
Yeah.
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 Um, quickly, because your life is not just about blockchain and NFTs, although it consumes a lot of your time at the moment, because you also invest in a lot of startups with that utilize this technology. But I quickly also wanted to ask you about your consulting business, where you help large enterprises, large organizations choose the right technology for them. So, whereas that is still in the technology industry, it's not necessarily NFT and blockchain. And I
Right.
was really curious about the biggest risks that you see out there at the moment for organizations choosing technology or being involved in technology. I know it's a bit of a left turn, but I
Yeah.
didn't want
No,
to
I
lose
think
that.
that's a great question. And what I see a lot of, well, everyone's been talking about, digital transformation for the
Mm,
last decade at least, and how business has changed because technology enables us to do so much more stuff. I like to take a step back and not think about the technology per se, but think about the customer experience. And I just did a video on LinkedIn a few days ago where I talked
mm,
about, a friend of mine who works at a major airline, and him understanding how bad the customer experience is when you call them and you're on hold for an hour and the website's slow and all these things don't work. And so, how much more successful would that airline be if they didn't have pissed off customers,
mm,
right? Actually, how much more successful would they be if they had happy customers? And so, in the US, we have, one airline called Southwest that has kind of quirky, and they do all this stuff. They don't give you seating assignments. You just get a letter and a number, and you show up and you queue up and you rush for the seats and you grab whatever seat that, you want, sort of thing. And, they've really been focused on, providing a high level of service to their customers. And their customer satisfaction for that airline tends to be really high, even though it's not the least expensive, even though it's not luxurious, even though you don't have an assigned seat. But it works because people feel like they're having a good experience.
yeah.
So, as an example, I had a client. It was one company bought another company, and they were about to go public. They were both equal size, a few thousand people each, and one used one phone system, another used a web-based, meeting system, another used another VoIP system. How do we harmonize all this to make it work for them?
Mm,
And that's really a business conversation, right? What are your customers looking for? What are your internal customers looking for? You as an employee or an internal customer, like, what do you like doing? What's easy for you to use? So helping companies understand that journey, both outward facing and inward facing, about what's important to them, their employees and their customers. And then from that point, narrowing down what solutions could help them achieve that.
mm,
So that's how we do that. Another thing that's incredibly important that people are concerned about, uh, as well as customer experience. I don't know if you ever gotten a letter saying, "I'm sorry, Ivanka, but all your data has been stolen, and we don't know
mm.
what's been taken, but we just have to let you know." Have you gotten a letter like that?
Luckily, I haven't.
Oh wow! In the States, I get those all the time. Like, oh, your healthcare provider, your health insurance company had millions of records stolen, or Target, the retailer, had millions of records stolen. And so part of your promise to your customers is ensuring that you're protecting yourself, protecting your
Mm,
data. protecting from ransomware attacks and phishing
Mm.
attacks. And a lot of companies just don't give that a lot of thought. They're like, well, yeah, we bought this thing and we get an alert when there's a problem. It's like, okay, but what happens when there's a problem
Mm.
late at night? Is there someone there to go fix it? And so that's one of the things, we helped another big company do is they're like, oh, we understand security. And then they got hit with ransomware. It was a big problem. And now they use a system where they have someone helping them and they have a whole 24/7 center making sure they don't get attacked.
Yeah.
Or
So,
if you're Zoom,
Mhm.
Zoom was growing so quickly that they needed more and more and more connectivity. And they had a really tough time during the pandemic keeping up with all the demand.
Mm.
And so a friend of mine helped them look at a bunch of ways that they could improve their connectivity around the globe and serve their customers better. So
Yeah.
those are the questions we ask. And then prescriptively, there are over 200 different companies we work with in cloud, in data center, in telecom, and meetings, security. And the last step is kind of helping them understand, hey, this could help your business be better. And if they do that, and then if they're more successful and their customers are happier, then we've done a good thing.
Yeah.
So I come to it from the state of mind of like, hey, I've been a CEO. I have a bunch of people on my team who've been CEOs, and we help a company think like a CEO with the lens of customer experience. And then the last step is which technologies would fit
Yeah.
you best.
Yeah. I like that the technology is a result of the questions and the answers that you're getting. It's not leading by the technology. But if I summarize the risks that you've just identified, is a lot of businesses, they run risks unawarely, if that's a word. Maybe I just made up a new English word, but they're unaware of running the risk because they don't have clarity about who their customer is, what they want, whether it's internal, external. They're really not thinking that it would happen to me, like from a security and cybersecurity risk point of view, or underestimating the impact that has, not just for their business, but reputational. Because if you do have to send out those letters, that's going to be quite impactful for an organization. And then really asking the questions on how can technology help us scale and grow, rather than, oh, this looks good, this has a good name, nobody's ever been fired for working with IBM. Well, maybe in this case it's not the right choice, because we need to have this scalability. So that's those are really clear risks that you can mitigate as organizations, to really have that
Or,
clarity.
as an example, here a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I run everything on Amazon, on AWS. And AWS is a great service. But the more concentrated you are, if you're only on AWS and there's a problem, then what's your backup plan? So a lot of companies are now doing what's called a hybrid cloud, where they run stuff in Azure by Microsoft or in AWS. And then they also run stuff in the cloud in different areas. So they have a diversity of, areas where they can work. And that's a smart business. You shouldn't have all your eggs in any basket, no matter what that basket is.
Yeah. And that's such a an old-fashioned way of thinking about business, isn't it? Not having all your eggs in one basket, not have just the one client who brings in all your revenue, not just have the one cloud provider that looks after your entire infrastructure. It's a true and tested recommendation for all businesses, big and small.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, a lot, as you were saying, it's so important that companies think about the result they want, not what's in a rack in a data center, right? I need my customers to be able to, if they call my call center, if they don't want to call, can they send me a message from Instagram? Can they send me a text? Can they send me something from TikTok? And a lot of these companies that all they do is take calls, they can't serve customers where they are today. And a lot of people want that. And so, that's one of those things as well, that it's easy to fix, but until the managers, owners articulate that, hey, we want to be accessible to our customers wherever, however, then that's not going to be a priority. And once
Yeah.
they realize, hey, we're going to do that, okay, what are you doing now? Okay, well, here's your path to go from here to there.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Mark, it has been a learning curve. It has been a pleasure. It's been so good to talk to you.
My pleasure.
I
Great
do
to reconnect
have
with you.
a slide where people can find you, which is your LinkedIn profile. I know you're really active on LinkedIn, and
Sure.
your technology consulting company is GigX. Is that how you pronounce
That's
it?
right. Perfect.
So are those your preferred ways that people get in touch with you if they want to have
Definitely.
a chat? Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
definitely the best way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, because you're pretty good on LinkedIn, so that's always such a
As
great
are
thing.
you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Mark.
you so much, Ivanka. Pleasure
Yeah,
to see you.
don't run away yet. I'm ending the stream now, so we go offline. But I just wanted to have a chat with you outside of this as well.